Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Parkside Cabin Rentals. Need a last-minute gift idea? Here you go. Give someone in your life the gift of a stay in the Smoky Mountains. Parkside Cabin Rentals has all the cabin options, big or small, for a January or February winter getaway to the Great Smoky Mountains. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from Parkside Cabin Rentals. Okay, simple question for you guys. We're going to keep this segment kind of short to get back on time. Let me put up the rankings here inside the SEC from 24/7 again. You see the top 10, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Texas A&M, Auburn, Florida. Then you get down 15, you got Tennessee, South Carolina 16, Kentucky 23, Mississippi State 25. This stood out to me when I was looking at the things this week because you're looking at where's Tennessee in relation to Florida and Auburn and Georgia. I'm not used to seeing South Carolina. They did get a 5-star at 16, Kentucky top 25, Mississippi State top 25. So my question for you is, while everyone's focused on is Tennessee catching up to the big boys, is this league continuing to improve behind Tennessee? I mean, this would tell you that if you're thinking, well, we'll get it back to the good old days and you're just going to romp and it'll be you in Florida and Georgia, this suggests, the East may be stepping up. Ryan, I'll start with you and everybody else can chime in here. Is Tennessee catching up to the top pack, or is there a little bit of a risk that the pack is catching up to them?
It's both. I mean, that's the real answer. I mean,
Darn it.
as are those things. I think
Cavaliers the question.
Yeah. No, but I think Kentucky is one of the big variables there. You saw a lot of their classes in the past in the 30s and 40s, and they won some battles against Tennessee head to head. They beat them for Trayvon Ripka, an in-state defensive lineman in Dixon. So there are examples of Kentucky definitely catching the pack, and that 10-win season was always going to help them in recruiting. So that's a big difference. South Carolina, even off a 4-8 season, still recruiting pretty well with guys like Travaris Robinson on staff. So yeah, I think that's a difference. The SEC is just deeper with good coaches and staff.
Makes Carolina look wise to have hung on to Will Muschamp. We'll see if it works out.
Well, it just shows how recruiting to me now is year-round more than ever because you beat all the teams behind you in those rankings. You didn't beat anybody ahead of you. And how are you recruiting for your needs that you have going forward? So, but yeah, I mean, they're catching up to you, but you also need to be catching up with who's ahead of you so you can be competitive with them.
Chuck makes a good point there too. What the effects of Tennessee going 7-5 and beating those teams probably wouldn't have been felt much this year because recruiting's so early now with the early signing period. Everything's been pushed up a couple months. Next year, let's see where they rank in relation to those teams, but they've started to at least maybe put Kentucky and South Carolina back behind them, so maybe that helps them in 2021.
I think for me, what you're looking at is which league has the position to have potentially two people always in the playoff for the national championship. And what you see is players that want to play in the best still recognize the SEC is the best place to play, whether it's with Kentucky, Tennessee, one of these other teams. I think what you're looking is a rising tide lifts all boats. I think what you see is that the players that want to play in the league that say, I'm good enough to be the best and I'm good enough to want to go in the pros, the SEC still gives me the best chance to look at that and say, how good am I? And I think that's caused a lift in not only the West teams, but I think you're starting to see it on the East teams, that this is starting to become more competitive, and I think the talent is being raised all across the league.
Mark, I'm going to throw one at you that you weren't expecting. When you look at this from a basketball perspective, football recruiting, any differences? I mean, in the way, obviously you're talking about much larger classes, but in the way people cover recruiting, in the way people watch recruiting, do you see any differences between football and basketball?
Well, basketball is different because one guy can make such a huge impact, right? I mean, you can have a 5-star quarterback, but if he doesn't have all the other pieces, it doesn't have that much impact on the results of the game. Whereas in basketball, a 5-star player can drastically affect the win column much more. To what Ryan was saying about the continued classes of highly ranked, that's where depth is a big thing that comes into play, especially with football. I mean, the better depth, the better chance you've got to win, especially late games. It's what basketball is feeling right now, right? We've had some misses. We haven't had depth. Yeah, we thought Jordan Bone was going to be here, but he's not. And so some of the depth, the Jalen Johnson hasn't developed. And our depth is now with Lamonte being out, it's a bigger issue. And so being able to stack good classes, they may not be 5 stars, but when you have a couple 5 stars, look, the 3 stars aren't always going to develop. You need some of those star guys, and if you can do that, it makes a big impact.
All right, very good. We're going to talk about that Turner injury again in the next segment. Specifically, what does it mean for this season? Is it time to just, as I think Chuck said it in the first segment, do you scrap this season and start looking ahead to next year? Or is there a chance that Rick Barnes, he of the $4 million salary, can pull a miracle, a Christmas miracle here? I wouldn't underestimate him, but we'll see. Where do you set the goals and expectations for this team now? Come on back on the Sports Source. Plenty more football, basketball to come.